We continue our series on biblical stewardship, and last week we talked about a biblical work ethic. This week we're going to be continuing that series, but the idea of a work ethic reminds me of the guy, this infamous guy, who made every excuse not to work. What he said was, my first job was working at an orange juice factory, but I found that I just couldn't concentrate. He then said that I worked as a lumberjack, but I just couldn't hack it. So they gave me the axe. After that, I tried to be a tailor, but I just wasn't suited for it. Next, I tried working at a muffler shop, but the work was just too exhausting. Then I tried to be a chef, but I just didn't have the time. I attempted to be a deli worker, but any way I sliced it, I just couldn't cut the mustard. My best job was being a musician, but I eventually found that I just wasn't noteworthy. I studied a long time to be a doctor, but discovered I didn't have enough patience. Next was a job at the shoe factory, but I just didn't fit in. I became a professional fisherman, but discovered that I couldn't live on my net income. I managed to get a good job at a pool maintenance company, but the work was just too draining. So then I got a job at a workout center, but they said I wasn't fit for the task. My last job was working at Starbucks, but I had to quit because it was always the same old grind. And after many years of trying to find steady work, I finally got a job as an historian until I realized there's just no future in it. It seems that the natural tendency of humans is to throw up every reason not to work and not to be productive. The ultimate goal of biblical stewardship is to bring glory to God by having a fully resourced church to reach the city of Merced and beyond. If you would, let's say this together. The ultimate goal of... we got to start over. Let's say this together. We're going to do like a responsive reading here. Let's just read this together. The ultimate goal of stewardship is to bring glory to God by having a fully resourced church to reach the city of Merced and beyond. Oh, that was really good. According to George Barna, only 6% of Christians, adult Christians, actually tithe. And another statistic suggests that the average Christian gives about 2.5% of his or her income. And that means that if all of our churches were obedient, our churches would have 4 times the budget that we now have, and that every church would be a fully resourced church able to change the world. But as it stands, we're not there. It's not happening. And I believe it won't happen by simply telling people they need to give. People can't or won't give because they are in debt. People are in debt because they can't or won't manage their money. People can't or won't manage their money because they have not understood what the Scriptures teach about money and debt. And others can't or won't get out of debt because they have not understood a biblical work ethic. So what we're going to do, instead of just teaching tithing, which is biblical, but teaching it by itself, I think, doesn't really help. We're going to look at some of the things surrounding it and try to create an entire framework through which we tithe. And the first one, of course, is the work ethic. We're going to look at biblical stewardship, theology of money. We're going to look at being debt-free and even gambling. So rather than just telling people what they already know, I hope and pray to equip all of us to understand and grasp the full picture of biblical stewardship, and that begins with developing a biblical view of work. So let's look at what we've learned so far. Last week we said basically that there were 5 things. The first one is that it is our lot in life to work. Even in the Garden of Eden, before sin entered into the world, we were called to work. It was easier work, but we were still to work. And I believe that when we get to heaven, we're still going to be working up there. The second one we discovered is that men are to be the work horses, that the responsibility falls on men differently than on women. We're also to work for 6 days. We always think of the Sabbath as the day off, but it also says that we're to work for 6 days. That doesn't mean you necessarily go out and get another job so that you can work Saturday, but that we're productive for 6 days and then to take a day off. Paul and many other people in the Bible also gave us an example of working night and day, and we talked about that. The Proverbs 31 woman working night and day, and Paul working night and day to accomplish his goals. And then we also found that being a sluggard will lead to your ruin. That some of the safety nets, the government programs that we have may or may not always be there, and we can't rely upon them. So we're going to move right on to number 6. Number 6 says this, that we are to work toward self-reliance. If you're the kind who likes to fill out notes, it's right there in your bulletin. Number 6, work towards self-reliance. This is from 1 Thessalonians 4. Look what Paul says. We encourage you, brothers, to do so even more, to seek a quiet life, to mind your own business, and to work with your own hands as we commanded you, so that you may walk properly in the presence of outsiders and not be dependent upon anyone. What was happening here is the same thing that happens today. You have this entire spectrum of corrupt religious leaders taking advantage of people's money. Leaders who are wanting to squeeze every last penny out of a poor population so that they can finance their mansions. And they do it in the name of God. So Paul wanted to stand apart from them and said, no, we're not going to do that. I'm not going to sit on my high horse on my throne and you guys work and then you're supposed to bring money to me so that I can live a life of comfort. He says, no. We are going to work. He wanted him and his team to stand apart from the rest of culture. He wanted their work ethic to speak for itself. So there's 2 things. The first thing is he says, walk properly. He says, I want you guys to walk properly. Well, what does that mean? It's a reputation. That I want the Christian brothers in Thessalonica to have a reputation for hard work. I want people to say, you know what? Those Christians are crazy. They have weird beliefs. I don't understand them. But those guys can work. And if a Christian, I know it's illegal, I can't discriminate, but if a Christian applies for this position, I'm going to hire him because those guys can work. That would be Paul's goal, is to establish a reputation of hard work. But the second thing he says is not to be dependent on anyone. Paul's desire for all Christians is to be financially self-reliant because of our outstanding work ethic. Now, I've been contemplating this for a couple of weeks. And we talked about how last week, in 2012, the government spent $1 trillion on programs to give to people. $1 trillion. That's a 1 with 12 zeros after it. $1 trillion is $1 billion in 1,000 piles. 1,000 piles of $1 billion makes $1 trillion. That's how much money was spent last year on cell phones and food stamps and welfare and different things like that. 126 government programs. And I'm trying to figure out how far Christians can be self-sufficient. For instance, if we lived in an outright socialist country where they're taxing us 75%, we can't just say, well, I'm going to be self-sufficient, so I'm not going to use government health care. Well, we're paying for it in our taxes. If you live in a country like that, you really have to. The system is set up that way. And I don't really like the fact that 15.5% or so of my income is taken away for Social Security, put into an account that's not really safe, and that one day I'll be paid back some of the money I put in, but I'll be told when and how I can use it. I don't really like that, but I'm paying for it. And so I have to use it. I don't really like the fact that I have to pay unemployment insurance, but I have paid, and so I guess if I have to use it, I will. So there's this weird line between there's a structure, a system in place, and I may not like it, but I might end up having to use it. So I think that this idea of being self-reliant, you'll have to decide where you're going to come in on this, whether you're going to use programs out there or not. But Paul is saying, you guys have to have a reputation for self-reliance and for work. Now let me just say this. If you are a Christian and you are purposefully misusing government programs, if you are purposefully using programs that you don't necessarily need so that you can get out of work, Paul would say you're doing wrong. Everyone has a rough season. College students need help while getting their education. People lose their jobs and need to go on unemployment. Family members get sick and lose the ability to work. Everyone is going to need help, and it's okay to use the resources, but don't use the system as a way to get out of being productive. Paul would tell us, get back on your feet, start working, and become financially self-sufficient. You know, it can be frustrating when you're in the workforce and you have friends that are getting unemployment and then they're working full-time jobs under the table. And it was so frustrating working side by side with guys that I know are getting unemployment, and they're getting a lot of it. And then they're making so much more under the table, and they're racking in bank by a misuse of a program that was designed to help you keep from sinking so that you could find another job. So number 6 is that we are to work towards self-reliance. Number 7 says this, that the retired or the wealthy are still to work. I sent my father-in-law a text this week congratulating him because after 41 years at a single company, he finally retired. That just doesn't happen anymore where you get a job when you're 19 at a place of employment, stay there 41 years and retire. And he was definitely glad to get out of there. And that guy is a workhorse. Some people are retired because they saved their money and did it the traditional way. You work your whole life, you put aside a little bit of money, that grows and grows and grows, and at one day you can stop working and live off of what you've built. Others are retired because they made a lot of money quickly. There's a lot of 35, 40-year-old guys that have done well in business. They've built up a big nest egg, and now they're kind of semi-retired, and that's great. So what I want to do is I want to address two groups of people in the retired wealthy category. The first group is the retired and able-bodied. There are some retired people that retire young enough to where they're still out and about, walking around, they're still healthy, they can still do lots of stuff. I worked at a church once where we had this guy who was a police officer, and he had just retired, and he was able-bodied. And I admired this man so much. Because when I came into the church in the morning, he would come in, and he always had this big bag of tools with him. And he had this weird coffee maker that he would bring with him. He eventually just left it at the church. He loved all these weird coffees. It was like some Keurig thing or whatever. So he'd come in, he'd have all these cups, and he'd make himself all these fancy coffees. And at this church, we didn't have a building and grounds committee. He was it. He would come in with a bag of tools, and he would just look around. What needs to be done? Oh, there's a hole in the wall right there. I'm going to patch it up. He would just, with this bag of tools, walk around the church, and everything that needed to be fixed, he would fix it. Why? Because he recognized that he's retired, but the calling from Scripture is to be productive. And so that's what he did. So if you are an able-bodied, retired person, certainly you should enjoy your retirement. Go on vacations, visit the grandkids, go on cruises, go to the Grand Canyon. But in between your excursions, be productive. Commit to a ministry of maintenance, a ministry of help, even a ministry of nursery. Now, I want to address this issue for just a moment. Last week or 2 weeks ago, I heard someone from our church say, and it was rightly so, that our church really needs to focus on outreach. Which I'm not sure what that means because I'm doing outreach. I know a lot of you are doing outreach. Maybe it's just not, maybe we don't know about it, but I know a lot of you here are reaching people. But you've heard the proverbial story that if you have a bucket and there's a hole in it, instead of trying to dump more water into the bucket, first plug the hole. The nursery is one of the biggest holes in our churches today. You know, there was a survey done by Rick Warren, you know, the guy who wrote The Purpose-Driven Life. And they did a survey, I think in the early 90s, and they surveyed thousands of people, and they said, what is the number one reason why people don't go to church? And the number one reason given was that either there's no nursery or there is low-quality nursery. It doesn't do us any good to go out there and invite everyone to come to this place if their children aren't going to be taken care of, because it means there's a hole in our bucket. And we had a guest family show up last week with kids, and we were short a nursery person. Someone was willing to step in and sacrifice, and that family didn't know that, you know, they barely got childcare provided for them. But if you're a single mom and you show up with kids and there's no nursery, what does that mean? You're packing up and you're going home, because you can't really participate. And if you show up and you're a couple and you've got kids, it means one of you is stuck in the foyer hanging out with your children while the other one gets to see the service. And so commit to a ministry of nursery. And this is for everybody. You know, right now, as far as I know, we only have 5 people that are doing nursery work. We have to hire someone to come in and be there every day, which we have hired a new person. But there are only 5 people who are said, yep, I'll do nursery work. And if more people step forward, you only have to do it every 2 or 3 months. So I would challenge you to think about that. And when you think about outreach, that inreach is part of outreach. So if you are a retired, able-bodied man or woman, I would challenge you to commit to a ministry of maintenance, of help, of nursery work, whatever it might be, but be productive. Now here's the second thing. You might be a retired person, but you are not physically able to lift children. You're not going to be roaming around the church fixing electrical sockets or plumbing or digging ditches or anything like that. You don't have that in you anymore. But it reminded me of a guy that I used to call Joe the Encourager. He went home to be with the Lord a decade ago, but I worked at a church, and he was not an able-bodied retired man. He was a retired man who had a hard time getting around, but I knew that every single time I walked into the building, he would have something kind to me, say to me. He would have something. He walked in, and he would, I'm so glad that you're here today. You're doing such a great, and he would just, and it wasn't fake. It wasn't, just blowing smoke. He literally loved to see you, and he wanted to encourage you, and that was his ministry. That was his work. And there was another lady who was also not able-bodied. She would come in with a walker, and she's not going to be lifting kids or helping with the maintenance. But what she would do is she would bake cookies every single week. And when we had our youth ministry, she would come in and lay those cookies down. And I knew it was hard for her to make those cookies. I knew that it cost her money. She was a widow. But that was her offering to the Lord, and how sweet it was to Him. But then there's the last issue, and possibly the most important. I was dumb enough at one point to think that the preaching and the staff members run the church. And one day I discovered it's not really it. That there is an undergirding ministry at just about every church that keeps the church moving forward. And it is most always the senior ladies and their prayer. In Colossians 4:12, Paul talks about a guy by the name of Epaphras. He says, Epaphras, who is one of your number, a bondslave of Jesus Christ, sends you his greetings, always laboring earnestly for you in his prayers. And so if you are retired and you are not able-bodied, this is one of the ministries that you can have. And I know right now that our church is run on that ministry. That our church is floating because we are moving forward because we have committed men and women who can't lift children, who can't fix plumbing or dig a ditch, but they are praying earnestly. They are laboring before the Lord, and the Lord is blessing us because of that. So we are to work towards self-reliance. If we are retired or wealthy, we're still to work. Here's number 8. Low accountability workers must be careful. Low accountability workers are workers that aren't really managed very thoroughly. As an example, I will point to myself. Pretty much nobody in this room, well, not nobody, most of you in this room don't know what I do during the week. Now, if you run a business, you probably know what I do during the week. But I can tell you that if I really was sly, I could probably slide by in this job with about 20 hours a week. Right now, there are websites out there where pastors can download sermons from the internet. I've never used one before, but I've seen them. So you can go and it'll give you a sermon title, like a cool title, catchy. It'll give you a verse. It'll give you your 4 points or 3 points. It will give you some sub-points. It will give you supporting verses, closing, opening illustrations. It will give you everything that you need. Some of them even have the PowerPoint slides with it so you can download them all together and even the notes to stick into the bulletin. And if I were to do that, right now I spend about maybe 10 to 11 hours a week on each message, but I could probably get that number down to about 3. I could use old Bible studies. I've been on church staff for 18 years, and I've got a lot of Bible studies, and I've kept every one of them on my computer, and I could reuse old ones. I could delegate tasks to people who are not yet qualified. I could stop pushing, stop dreaming, stop trying new things, and slide by, and you might not notice for a while. I am a low accountability worker. I have the ability to do that. Other pastoral staff, our ministerial staff, also have the ability to slide by. Whether you're doing youth ministry or children's ministry or music ministry, there's always the ability to do the bare minimum for a week. And sometimes we have to. Sometimes we have vacation Bible school and we're working tremendous number of hours. And so our other ministries, we do the bare minimum. Sometimes we're sick. There's a new baby born. There's something else going on. And we do the bare minimum for a season. But we have the ability to slide by, but God is watching. I'm sorry to say that I have worked at some churches, and I've had to leave the churches because the pastor was sliding by. Show up late, take a long lunch, leave early. Do the bare minimum to keep the church from firing him. And as ministerial staff, we have to be above reproach, and we have to have a work ethic. This also would probably extend to some of you who are volunteer staff who have been given tasks such as teaching. That as teachers, you have the ability to cram for your Bible study on Sunday morning, on Saturday night. And if you're working with children, you can probably get away with it a little easier. But the Lord knows, and the long-term effects will be evident. Let me speak to one other group. I don't know if we want to call them stay-at-home moms, stay-at-home dads, homemakers, home educators. First, let me just say that you have an incredibly noble task if you are taking care of your children, and don't let anyone ever tell you it's not a real job. I was talking with this lady once, and I said, hey, so what do you do for a living? And her countenance dropped. She lowered her head, and she said, well, I'm a stay-at-home mom. And what she was kind of saying was that isn't very honorable. It's not a real job. And I was like, no, that's awesome. That's amazing. That's noble that you put that time in to raising your children. But like any low accountability job, it's easy to fall into laziness. So here's what Paul says. He says, at the same time, he's talking about women. This is a traditional culture where the women are staying home. They also learn to be idle. Going from house to house, they are not only idle, but they are also gossips and busybodies, saying things they shouldn't say. Therefore, I want younger women to marry, have children, manage their households, and give the adversary no opportunity to accuse us. For some have already turned away to follow Satan. What Paul's saying is that in this early church, there were some stay-at-home educators, stay-at-home moms that were abdicating their responsibilities, going around, gossiping, just not putting the time into managing their households. And so if you are a stay-at-home mom, a stay-at-home dad, your task is to be productive. And you can get away with it for a while, but God is watching. So we're to work towards self-reliance. Retired or wealthy people are still to work. Low accountability workers must be careful. Here's number 9. We are to thrive during poor employment. Now, I know that some of you here in this room are what has been recently been described as underemployed. And that means that you had a good job in 2006, 2007, but you don't have that job anymore. And you're not making as much money as you used to make. And in fact, because of the inflation and the worth of the dollar, you're making far less than you were making back in 05 or 06 or 07. And some of you here are in jobs that is below your quality grade. That you have a degree, you have training, you have certain skills, and you ought to be right here, but you can't get there, and you're working at a lower level than really what you're worth. And I understand that it's very, very hard to deal with that. Look, I had a job, a good pastor job between 2000 and 2009. I had this job for 9 years. I had medical insurance. It was a livable wage. It was a great thing. But then I lost my job 3 weeks before I got married, and right as this whole economy collapsed. I lost my home, and I lost everything. And what I did is I spent the next several years working in garbage jobs. I don't mean to say that the people were garbage or the companies were garbage. They just weren't jobs that could support a family. And so it was very, very hard to 1 year be a pastor of a church. And I'm not wearing a suit every day, obviously, but when I walk around, I'm wearing, nice clothes. I'm not covered in dirt or filth. And people say, well, what do you do for a living? Oh, I'm a pastor. Oh, wow, that's great. Did you go to college? Yeah, I have a master's degree. Oh, great. So there was a certain level of respect with that level or that kind of job. But then to lose everything and then to end up at a company where you're at the lowest at the totem pole, you're digging a ditch, and it was eye-opening to see how people would treat me. From one day, walking into a store, dressed nice, people would say, yes, sir, no, sir, can I help you? And the very next day, I'm covered with mud, fecal matter, dirty. I walk into a store, and it's like, oh, scumbag alert. And so it was very humiliating for me, and some of you have had to go through that as well. Some of you have had to take jobs that were below your worth to remain productive. But here's the thing. During these times, we have got to thrive, and we've got to keep working. I would encourage you to look at the story of Joseph. Genesis chapter 37. Here's a guy that got shifted around from one horrible job to another. But what he did during those horrible jobs is he thrived. And his work ethic became evident so that in a short period of time, he became the second most powerful man at that time, probably in the world. Because he thrived and worked during poor unemployment. In his case, slavery. Here's the next one. To do the best job you can at whatever you do. You remember King Solomon, right? You have Saul, you have David, and you have Solomon. This was the apex, the peak of this kingdom of Israel. This was somewhere around 900 BC. King Solomon was the richest man. He had everything he wanted. If he wanted women, he had it down. He had all kinds of women. He wanted wealth, he had wealth. He built buildings. He had, everything that his heart desired, he did. This guy had more experience than any person you will ever meet. And at the end of his life, at the end of this long life, after he's done all of these amazing things, he made a couple of statements about what's important. And I think these are really, really good. Here's the first one. This is at the end of his life. The most important thing is to enjoy life with the wife you love all of the days of your fleeting life, which has been given to you under the sun, all your fleeting days. At the end of his life, the best thing that you can possibly do is just to love your spouse. But he goes on to say a few other things. He says, whatever your hands find to do, do with all of your strength. If you're going to be a pastor, be the best pastor that you can be. If you're going to be a stay-at-home educator for your children, be the best that you can be. If you're a blue-collar or a white-collar worker, be the best that you can possibly be. This is the most important thing. And then Paul echoes this, Colossians 3:23. Whatever you do, do it enthusiastically, as something done for the Lord and not for men, knowing that you will receive a reward of an inheritance from the Lord. You serve the Lord Christ. Paul says, whatever you do, do it enthusiastically. Here's number 11. Work in order to give. The ultimate goal of stewardship is to bring glory to God by having a fully resourced church in order to reach Merced and beyond. Look what Paul says, in Acts 20, verse 33. It says, I have not coveted anyone's silver or gold or clothing. You yourselves know that these hands have provided for my needs and for those who were with me. In every way I have shown you that by laboring like this, it is necessary to help the weak and to keep in mind the words of the Lord Jesus, for he said, it is more blessed to give than to receive. Look what he says. He says it is necessary. Well, what is necessary? Labor. A work ethic. It is necessary. Why? To help the weak. So you saying that I work hard and then I walk along the canal there and just give money to street people? No. We'll talk about that later. We're going to talk about dealing with street people and whether we're enabling them or we're actually helping them. And we'll get to that later. But the idea is that you work hard so that you have something to share. Paul even says it this way: the thief must no longer steal. Instead, he must do honest work with his own hands so that he has something to share with anyone in need. And here's the last one, number 12. Ultimately, we work for the Lord. Whether you are new in the workforce and you're slaving away at a fast food restaurant, whether you're in customer service where people treat you like garbage, whether you're digging a ditch, whether you're staying at home with the kids, ultimately you work for the Lord. Don't work only while being watched in order to please men, but as slaves of Christ, do God's will from your heart. Render service with a good attitude, as to the Lord and not to men, knowing that whatever good each one does, slave or free, he will receive back from the Lord. So how do we work? He says to work from your heart and to work with a good attitude. Why are we doing this? He says because God is watching, and he also says a reward is coming. I like this, I liked a photo that was there earlier. It's not there anymore. I'm not sure what happened. I had a photo, an old black and white photo, of some men who are from the greatest generation that have been profiled by Tom Brokaw in one of his books, The Greatest Generation. And you know some of the titles that have been given, the millennials and Generation X and the boomers and the busters. And the greatest generation, I think, is referred to as the builder generation. And in this photo that I had up on the screen, it showed this huge beam towering above New York City. And you could just see way in the distance the cars and the buildings. And way up on top of this skyscraper, there's a beam. And you see men in overalls, men in jeans, with their lunch boxes up there, high up in the sky, eating their lunches during a hard day of work. This was the greatest generation, the generation that built the Hoover Dam, the generation that built the skyscrapers in New York City and Chicago and in other places, the generation that enabled us to build the equipment that we needed for World War II. For some reason, that generation understood what it meant to work. And even the women rolled up the sleeves of their arms. And you know the famous poster of the women flexing their muscle. That generation knew what it meant to work and to move forward and to be productive. My prayer is that one day when this generation passes, this generation of Christians, that church historians would refer to us as the worker generation. Because we were willing to stand up, be self-sufficient, use the elbow grease that God has given us, and get the job done. Let's stand together and pray. I ask you to bow your heads and close your eyes, and let's just spend some time with the Lord.